York City, good morning. I'm Bonnie Quinn with your Bloomberg Brief. Here's what you need to know. President Donald Trump's Board of Meetings signing ceremony about to commence. We'll get more live from Davos coming right up. NATO chief Mark Rutte says Greenland talks with President Trump did not include the issue of sovereignty as POTUS drops his tariff threats against Europe, citing a framework deal. That tariff relief helping risk appetite today, along with an AI rally that continues. We also, of course, get jobless claims later on and November PCE among data on deck. So let's take a look at those markets because risk appetite does seem to be coming back. We're getting a nice rally there in those futures. Nasdaq 100 futures continuing off yesterday's optimism following Jensen Huang's remarks that AI is going to be a labor story, that we're going to see a huge amount of investment and that's going to create labor over the coming years. Let's take a look at the bond universe because we saw a continued rebound in Japan as well. A lot of calm in this market. The 10-year yield right back down to 423.50. We're not under 420 yet, but we are going in that direction. Directionally as well for the 30-year yield is lower by more than a basis point. That 2-year yield, though, is staying a little elevated at 358.68. We have gold coming off just a little bit today, but Goldman Sachs raising its year-end target to gold by more than 10% to $5,400 an ounce now, in fact. Gold itself is about 4,800 and change at the moment. And the VIX index is right back to 16 and change. Let's get to some individual movers now. A few hours before the open of US trade, let's get to Chloe Melee in London.
Good morning, Bonnie. It's a good day for the semiconductor industry this morning, with green across the screen for those names as part of this broader technology rally. And those names have also gotten a boost from the comments from the NVIDIA CEO in Davos, which really reinforced investor enthusiasm for this AI trade. And therefore, we are seeing green across the screen there, and ARM in particular doing well in pre-market trading. Moving on, but staying within that chip-making sector, and Intel is also in the green this morning, having yet another good day ahead of its results later today. It will update the market on the progress of its turnaround plan after a really big rally in the shares lately. And it seems that investors are going into those earnings with a lot of confidence and a lot of enthusiasm for Intel. And finally, Ubisoft over in France is having a really difficult day today after cutting its guidance and also announcing a major restructuring plan that includes closing down the studios and cancelling or delaying games. And so we saw the steepest ever drop in the shares for Ubisoft, and we are down more than 30% right now.
Chloe, thank you so much. Chloe is going to be back with us a little later on for some more movers. President Trump to meet with his proposed Board of Peace, or at least the beginnings of it, a group of leaders to provide oversight for a transition in the war-torn Gaza Strip. Let's go straight to Davos now and Bloomberg's Jumana Bersecci. So, Jumana, this is the first sort of public gathering of members potentially of this board, but we really don't know yet who's going to make up this oversight committee, do we? We've had interest expressed from Mark Carney, but a hard no from France's Macron, for example. A lot of different views out there.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we should be finding out very shortly, Vonnie, who exactly is going to be on the board, because as we speak, President Trump is arriving to the Congress Center for the Board of Peace signing ceremony. Now, what we do know is invitations have been sent out to over 50 heads of state. What we understand is about 20 of them have accepted so far, and those countries will likely be represented at this signing ceremony that is shortly due to commence. But as you say, it has been marked by a lot of controversy, not least, for example, President Putin has been invited to be on the board, which is somewhat surprising. President Zelensky also was invited, but he said, if Putin is going to be on this board, it's very difficult to see how we can work together on this one to bring about peace. One of the other criticisms is that the charter of the Board of Peace was leaked a couple of days ago. And it actually had no mention of Gaza, which is extremely ironic. It seemed to have sort of progressed in terms of ambitions to just being a Board of Peace with oversight of specifically Gaza to a more global peacekeeping mandate, and i.e. perhaps competing a little bit with the United Nations. So that, I think, has raised some eyebrows, especially among some of those Western leaders. One of the other controversies is reportedly there is a $1 billion fee that would need to be paid for permanent membership. So initially, these heads of state who are joining the board would subscribe to a 3-year mandate. If they want to continue, they'd have to cough up cash. Again, a big question about that. And then finally, The chair of the Board of Peace is none other than President Trump himself. And nowhere in the charter does it say that there'll be a rotating chair, i.e. he could be chair for life. And I think, again, some questions there about the ultimate authority that President Trump is going to have over this board. But that being said, I think, let's just take a moment away to emphasize that this is a very significant moment. It does mark the passage of phase 1 of that ceasefire deal in Gaza to phase 2. It is one element of phase 2. And of course, it is part and parcel of moving towards the pathway and ultimately to bringing about stability in the region. And what other people are saying is ultimately this is an internationalization of a conflict that has been localized for decades now. And the fact that you do have so many international players interested in being part of this Board of Peace is constructive.
Exactly. You do have to wonder if it isn't downplaying Gaza slightly, though, by making it a more general oversight committee, which originally didn't seem to be the intention. Let's move on to the Greenland issue, Jumana, because Bloomberg spoke to NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte about his talks with President Donald Trump. Let's have a listen to what he said.
We didn't discuss at all about that issue. So we discussed how can we protect Greenland, how can we protect the wider Arctic region. And again, I think President Trump was the one who reinvigorated NATO at the summit in The Hague with the famous 5%. I think we can be thankful for the fact that he again has been able to take leadership on this issue. How can we collectively protect the Arctic?
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte there. So no details really, Jumana, and this framework of a deal, we don't really know what it entails, do we?
Well, what I was saying earlier this morning is it started with an ice and it ended with a thaw yesterday. If you think about the sort of development of the day, the evolution of the day, when President Trump gave his speech yesterday afternoon, he reiterated his desire to acquire Greenland somehow, even if not by force. And the tone dramatically changed a couple of hours later after he had that meeting with the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who Bloomberg spoke to this morning. And after that, it was announced that a framework for the future of Greenland had been agreed to. We don't understand exactly what that framework entails, but what we do understand from speaking to the NATO Secretary General is that Greenland's sovereignty was not discussed at all. And ultimately, this is about a security arrangement for Greenland and for those Arctic countries. And perhaps one of the concessions is for the U.S. to have a stronger presence in military bases dotted around Greenland. But again, it's conjecture at this point. We don't know what is exactly in the contents of that deal. But in an interview that President Trump gave last night to CNBC, he did mention that critical minerals were also going to be a part of that framework as well. So yes, to go back to what I was saying, a de-escalation of tensions of sort. But again, a big rift opened up in that transatlantic alliance over the last couple of days. And you've got to wonder how quickly European leaders are going to rush back into really throwing their weight behind this and also behind that EU-US trade deal that was agreed to last year. They will most certainly be having some reservations, especially after the comments that President Trump has made criticizing many of those European leaders in the last couple of days.
And in fact, those seats at that Board of Peace signing do seem to be filling up right now. I just see Javier Milei, and it looks like Benjamin Netanyahu is also on that stage, and we are getting more world leaders. So it does appear that we are going to have a signing ceremony along with several world leaders. Jumana, this Board of Peace, might it be successful? Does it need members from the West and from other jurisdictions? Can they all work together on something like this? If Putin joins, say, for example, and Mark Carney joins, and perhaps there's a representative, from well, obviously, Netanyahu is going to be part of it. Viktor Orban, it looks like, as well. I mean, is this a group that can work together and decide things?
Well, I think you raise a very interesting point. And if you want to think about whether something is going to be successful, you have to understand what their objective is to begin with. What is exactly the KPIs that they're looking to achieve? And again, we don't have a lot of details on the ground there. But the fact that so many heads of state have shown interest to be a part of that, I think, is a positive signal. And you talk about the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. A couple of days ago, Israel had expressed their reservations to joining the Board of Peace. They were uncomfortable with some members that had been included, not least reportedly Qatar and Turkey, but they too seem to have changed their mind in the last 24 hours. So Netanyahu has actually signed on to it. In addition to many Arab states too, yesterday a group of them put out a note saying that they will sign on to this Board of Peace. They see it as a pathway to stability, including the likes of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Turkey, as I mentioned, Pakistan, amongst others too. So there is support from the Middle East region. You are hearing, for example, Milei was one of the first to sign on to it, the Argentinian president, obviously a close ally of U.S. President Trump. But then European leaders, again, expressing some reservations. President Macron, one of the first to reject the proposal, but open to discussions about what exactly the board's mandate is going to include. We spoke about some of the controversies earlier, and especially that $1 billion payment. Similar remarks coming through from Meloni. So not completely out of the question.
Yes.
But the fact that this is an international committee, I think, is quite significant. But they are an oversight committee, nothing to do with the day-to-day administration.
Absolutely. And we just see Mark Carney coming onto that stage as well, along with a host of other leaders. The State Department, in fact, had to instruct US diplomats to suggest that President Trump's Board of Peace is not meant to replace the United Nations, but rather complement it, right? Jumana, we have this reporting today, which is fascinating. And even that idea of the $1 billion payment for a permanent membership, it almost mirrors the Security Council, right, where there are permanent members and then rotating members. So there does seem to be a little bit of mirroring here of an international body like the United Nations.
Yes, and in this particular instance, what you do have is this Board of Peace that's established with all of those as heads of state that you list. And I think we're going to get a better understanding of which countries have signed up to it in just a few moments as you keep listing the countries that you're seeing there. But the way it's going to work is this is a Board of Peace that has oversight, and then there is a high representative that has been appointed. He is a Bulgarian diplomat. Mladenov is his name, and he ultimately will be overseeing the day-to-day activities of this a technocratic authority that's going to be composed of Palestinian nationals, all with technocratic backgrounds. And so they are the ones that are going to be tasked with the day-to-day administration of the Gaza Strip, with oversight from that representative who ultimately is going to report back to that Board of Peace.
All right, Jumana, do stay with us because President Trump has just taken the stage now, and we will actually tune in to the ceremony to listen to what President Trump has to say about this Board of Peace.
Long in the making, and many countries have just received their notice, and everybody wants to be a part of it. And we'll work with many others, including the United Nations. But I want to thank you all for being here. Yesterday, we had an incredibly successful visit with many of the world's top business leaders, the best, the biggest, most successful, and foreign heads of state. And now we have one of the most important meetings of all, the official formation of what is known as the Board of Peace. I want to thank the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner, and their extraordinary work. I mean, they have done an amazing job. We have peace in the Middle East. Nobody thought that was possible. We've settled 8 wars, and I believe another one's coming pretty soon. You know what that is? The one that I thought was going to be an easy one has turned out to be probably the most difficult. Last month, 29,000 people died, mostly soldiers, in Ukraine, Russia. Think of that, 29,000, 27,000 in the month before, 26,000 in the month before that. It's terrible. But we have meetings and we think we're making a lot of progress. Thanks as well to Secretaries Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, and Chris Wright, U.S. Trade Representative, Jamieson Greer. They're all doing such an incredible job. Ambassador Callista Gingrich, who is here, doing a fantastic, really fantastic work. Thank you, Callista. and many other members of my administration who are so committed to peace, and they're also committed to great success. Very importantly, let me recognize the very first group of distinguished members of the Board of Peace. They will be introduced by name in just a moment. Caroline will be doing that introduction. And to each and every one of you, we are truly honored by your presence today. Leaders of countries, in most cases, very popular leaders. Some cases, not so popular, but that's the way it goes in life. Thanks as well to President Karol Nawrocki of Poland, who's a fantastic man. He just won a very big election. I'm very proud of him. Amazing. Along with former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Tony Blair. Thank you, Tony, for being here. We appreciate it. And members of the Board of Peace Executive Board, great group. This week marks the one-year anniversary of my second inauguration as president. No administration in history has achieved such a sweeping turnaround in 12 months' time at home and abroad. We have a tremendous mandate. We won the popular vote by millions. We won every swing state to 7. They were saying, can he win all 7? Is it possible? Because it's not done. And we won all 7. We have a great mandate back at home. As I said yesterday, the U.S. economy is booming with virtually no inflation. It was 1.2% for the last 3 months. And we inherited the worst inflation in the history of our country. And we have economic growth now of 5.4%, looks like. And I think that number can double and triple if we do the right things and if we change thinking so that if you announce good numbers, the markets go up, instead of if you announce good numbers, the market goes down because everybody tries to kill it by lowering or raising interest rates depending on the situation. When America booms, the entire world booms. And we have secured commitments for over $18 trillion in new investment coming into our country, which is a record by many times over, not just by a little bit, by many times. There's no country ever in history that's gotten anywhere near that number. Slashed our trade deficit by 77%. This is in 1 year. Yesterday was 1 year. And signed historic trade deals with nations from all over the globe. Today, the world is richer, safer, and much more peaceful than it was just 1 year ago. We put out all those fires. A lot of people didn't know, including me, that some of those wars were going on. And some of them were going on for, in one case, 32 years, in another case, 35 years, and another one, 37 years. We were very happy to stop the war that had started with India and Pakistan, 2 nuclear nations. And I was very honored when the Prime Minister of Pakistan said President Trump saved 10 and maybe 20 million lives by getting that stopped just before bad things were going to happen. As president, I ended those 8 wars in 9 months, including Cambodia and Thailand. And by the way, many of the leaders are here. Kosovo and Serbia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda, Pakistan and India, Israel and Iran, Egypt and Ethiopia. We're working on that right now. I met yesterday with a very good general and a very good leader of Egypt. We're working on a dam that was built which precludes the Nile River from getting water. It's a little tough situation, but we'll get that settled. I really had it just about settled in my first term, and then we had a rigged election. Took me out of commission for a little while, but here I am back. We'll get it settled. But it's a pretty tough situation. A dam was built, and the water doesn't come down to the Nile. When I think of Egypt, I think of the Nile, but I think of the Nile with water in it. Armenia and Azerbaijan, who, I mean, a lot of these leaders have become my friends. They've become my friends. They're here. And, of course, the war in Gaza, which is really coming to an end. We have little fires that we'll put out, but they're little. They were giant giant, massive fires, and now they're down to little fires, and we can put them out very easily. We have 59 countries that are involved in peace in the Middle East. Many of them not in the Middle East. They're near the Middle East, but they're not in the Middle East. And many have said that if Hamas doesn't do what they promised they would do, and I think they probably will, but they were born with rifles in their hands. They were literally born. The first day they had a rifle put into their hands, but they have to give up their weapons. And if they don't do that, it's going to be the end of them. But many countries have told me we want to go in and do it. And they really aren't countries that you traditionally think of as being involved in that. But that's the fire. Hezbollah in Lebanon, we have to do something about that. But these are, I call them remnants. They're small remnants compared to what it was before. It was massive, large, powerful countries fighting each other. In another great victory for the ultimate goal of peace in June, we obliterated Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity with Operation, we call it Operation Midnight Hammer. And it was midnight, it was dark, no moon, and every single one of those bombs from the B-2 bombers hit the air shafts and went deep into the earth and totally obliterated everything that they were doing. They were 2 months away from having a nuclear weapon. We can't let that happen. And Iran does want to talk, and we'll talk. We've also hit ISIS in Syria, and very strongly, as you know. In my first administration, I took out al-Baghdadi, the founder of ISIS, and he was trying to start it up again because due to the tremendous talent of General Raisin Kane, as I call him, he wiped out ISIS in a period of 3 weeks in my first term. You know, we had a great first term, but the second term is, I think, blowing it away, actually. But we took out ISIS, and we had, it was gone, but during the Biden administration, it formed again a little bit. We hit it very hard in Syria. And Syria, by the way, I spoke with the president, is making a lot of progress, tremendous progress, actually. We're very happy about that. We took off all sanctions, which gives them a chance to breathe. And he is working very, very hard, and I think he's going to put it all together. So many things are happening, many good things. Threats to Europe and America, the Middle East, and other places are really calming down. It's a lot different than it was just 1 year ago. Just 1 year ago, the world was actually on fire. A lot of people didn't know it. And in Nigeria, we're annihilating terrorists who are killing Christians. We've hit them very hard. They've killed thousands and thousands of Christians. What's that all about? Much of this unprecedented success is possible because I rebuilt our military in my first term, and now we're making it even stronger. We have a budget of over $1 trillion this year, and next year we're going to $1.5 trillion. Our country's never done better economically. We're taking in numbers that we've never taken in, not only the fact that the investment is at 18 trillion plus, but our jobs numbers, everything is, I think, maybe better than ever before. I think you're going to see and a lot of you are investing in our country. I think you're going to be extremely happy with your investments. I think you'll see numbers like you haven't seen before. I also secured commitments from virtually all NATO allies to increase their defense spending to 5% of GDP. Everybody but Spain. I don't know what's happening with Spain. Why would they not do that? They want a free ride, I guess, huh? Every country but Spain increased to 5%. I don't know why. We're going to have to talk to Spain. With America's renewed attention to security of the Western Hemisphere, I've stopped the invasion on our southern border and designated the drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. And you probably saw that we've virtually stopped almost 100% all drugs coming in by water. And now we're going to stop them on land. The land is easy. The water is tough. But that's down now. I heard it just last night. It was 97. Now it's 98.1%. And we're trying to figure out who are the 2% that are willing to get onto those boats. I don't think they watch television or the news. But we've taken out almost 100% of all of the drugs coming into the United States by water. And now we'll, I think, very easily stop them on land. That's the easy part. We wanted to wait till the other was taken care of. And earlier this month, thanks to the unrivaled skill, power, and might of the U.S. military, we have the most powerful military in the world by far. We captured the outlaw dictator, Nicolas Maduro, and the people of Venezuela are very happy about it. And we're having great relationships with the leaders of, the new leaders of Venezuela. The relationships have been good. We're opening up the country to our giant oil companies, and it's going very well. We've already taken out, think of this, 50 million barrels of oil, and a lot of that's going to go back to Venezuela. They'll do more income with us in a short period of time than they did in years, because as much oil as they have, and they have a lot, just about the most. After us, there's a couple of countries that are in that category, but we have the most, actually, and they're second. Between Venezuela and us, we have 62% of the world's oil, but they have very little production, so they'll have a lot of production. All the oil companies, we had meetings, you probably saw, all the oil companies want to go in. They want to go in immediately. They're already touring the sites. But our military was amazing. That strike was amazing. We had a second wave coming. We didn't need it. They said, no second wave. We don't want a second wave. The first wave was enough. And of course, we're working to end the horrible killing in Ukraine, a war that should never have happened and would have never happened if I were president. That was not going to happen. I used to speak to Vladimir Putin about Ukraine, and it was the apple of his eye, but he would never have ever done it. Said, you can't do that, Vladimir. As part of this historic record of major peace initiatives, today we're announcing more details regarding the Board of Peace, so important. This board has the chance to be one of the most consequential bodies ever created, and it's my enormous honor to serve as its chairman. I was very honored when they asked me to do it. We had an idea to do it, and then they came, they said, you be the chairman. And but I take it very seriously. We have a great group of people and incredible young people that are leading it from within. It's running beautifully, started already. And every country, just about every country, wants to be a part of it. And we just sent out the letters a couple of days ago, and these are just the countries that are here. They happen to be in Davos. So we said, would be honored if you wanted to join us up on the stage. And it's really great. They're friends of mine. I think, let me see. Yeah, every one of them is a friend of mine. A couple, let's see, a couple I like, a couple I don't like. No, I like, actually, this group, I like every single one of them. Can you believe it? Usually I have about 2 or 3 that I can't stand. Usually I have 2 or 3 that I don't like. I don't find them up here. I like every one of these people. No, they're great people. They're great leaders. And the Board of Peace is composed of leaders, the top leaders in the world, actually. Last October, we released a plan for the permanent end to the conflict in Gaza, and I'm pleased to say that our vision was unanimously adopted by the United Nations Security Council late last year. Under phase 1 of this plan, we have painstakingly maintained that Gaza, and we're going to have it very strongly, and it's what we have. Maintained the Gaza ceasefire, delivered record levels of humanitarian aid. We've given aid. You know, you used to hear all the people were starving and it was terrible. Now we have, you don't hear that anymore. We've delivered record levels of humanitarian aid. I want to thank the United States, but I want to thank some of the countries that are sitting right up here, because they've sent great aid, aid also in the form of money, where we go out and purchase food, and you don't hear those stories anymore with people starving. And secured the release of all 20, we secured the release of all 20 living hostages. Now, I want to thank Steve Witkoff and Jared and everybody for working so hard. They worked so hard, but there were 20 remaining living hostages. Now, we got hundreds out, but the last 20, I said, boy, that's going to be a tough one. I said that a year before. And it was a tough one, but we got them. Got all 20, every one of them. And we had also about 28 that were dead. but the parents wanted them just as though they were living, just as much. Some cases, it almost seemed more. It was amazing, actually, the love. But their boy had been killed in just about all cases, young men. Their baby, their boy, had been killed, and they wanted the body of their boy, and it looked like it couldn't be done. And with the exception of one, and we're close on the track of that, we've got them all, every single one of them, which is amazing. It's a rough job. That was a rough job. And I've been very clear that Hamas must return that last remaining deceased hostage as well, and that will be the full commitment. And then we get on to other things, and we're committed to ensuring Gaza is demilitarized, properly governed, and beautifully rebuilt. It's going to be a great plan, and that's where the border peace really started. And I think we can spread out to other things as we succeed with Gaza. We're going to be very successful in Gaza. It's going to be a great thing to watch, and we can do other things. We can do numerous other things. Once this board is completely formed, we can do pretty much whatever we want to do, and we'll do it in conjunction with the United Nations. You know, I've always said the United Nations has got tremendous potential, has not used it, but there's tremendous potential in the United Nations, and you have some great people at the United Nations, but so far it hasn't. You know, on the 8 wars that I ended, I never spoke to the United Nations about any of them. And you would think that I should have. You would think they could have done those 8 wars, but they couldn't have. And they tried, I guess, in some of them, but they didn't try hard enough. But there's tremendous potential with the United Nations. And I think the combination of the Board of Peace with the kind of people we have here, coupled with the United Nations, can be, you know, something very, very unique for the world. It's for the world. This isn't United States. This is for the world. As everyone can see today, the first steps toward a brighter day for the Middle East and a much safer future for the world are unfolding right before your very eyes. Together, we are in a position to have an incredible chance. I don't even call it a chance. I think it's going to happen. To end decades of suffering, stop generations of hatred and bloodshed, and forge a beautiful, everlasting, and glorious peace for that region and for the whole region of the world, because I'm calling the world a region. The world is a region. We're going to have peace in the world. And boy, would that be a great legacy for all of us. Everybody in this room is a star, or you wouldn't be here. There's a reason that you're here, and you're all stars. You're the biggest people, the most important people in the world, most powerful people in the world. And when you use that genius that you have, that very unusual, very inspired genius, when you use that for peace, the opposite of peace has no chance. So I just want to say it's tremendous to be with you, and I think this is something that we're doing that's very important. This is the most important. I was so looking forward to being here, and yesterday was a tremendous success. A lot of good things happened, but this was something that I really wanted to be here and do, and I could think of no better place because so many people were together. And now to bring the Board of Peace into full force, I ask Sheikh Isa of Bahrain and Foreign Minister Barita of Morocco to join me in signing and ratifying the Board of Peace Charter. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, this is the Trump Board of Peace. I guess its first meeting, although it hasn't been fully formed yet, and a signing ceremony with representatives from Bahrain and Morocco, along with President Trump. We know that there are several members that have signed up, including Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Morocco, Azerbaijan, Armenia, a whole host of countries. And the president also thanking former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair and the executive board, including people like Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, and other members of the administration and advisors to the administration and people close to the administration. He said the Board of Peace would work closely with the United Nations. Of course, we know the State Department had sent out a missive to diplomats saying that this is not meant to replace the United Nations in any way. Although we have to say that Mark Carney, for example, of Canada, who had said he would be interested and who still has signalled that he's up for joining the board, said on Tuesday that it should be designed to address Gaza's needs. Mark Carney, in fact, not on that stage, though several other world leaders are. Let's get to Bloomberg's Jumana Bersetchi, who's in Davos, because that is a very important point, Jumana. We heard a lot today. We heard about Venezuela. We heard President Trump saying that he had ended 8 wars. He talked a little bit about Iran and said that Iran wanted to talk and that he would talk with Iran. But there wasn't all that much about Gaza and what comes next for that area of the world.
Well, as is customary to any of these President Trump speeches, he touted a lot of his administration's achievements, and not just specific to Gaza, but around the world. And I think he has given the Trump administration a lot of credit for so-called, quote-unquote, ending wars and conflicts in many parts of the world, which was actually one of the reservations that people had vis-a-vis the establishment of this Board of Peace. How much of its mandate is going to be really focused on Gaza versus establishing a more global peacekeeping entity, which actually might compete with the United Nations. But interesting to note that just now he said that the goal is to work alongside the United Nations. So it was very clear he wanted to make that point in the remarks that he just gave. And as it pertains to Gaza, he also spoke about Phase 1 and the importance of the cessation of hostilities, then the release of the hostages in exchange for those prisoners. He also said that key now is absolutely Hamas disarmament and that they would be completely abolished if they don't go down that route. He also mentioned that there's been a lot of pressure applied to Hamas to release the last deceased hostage. So there was a little bit of a mention and reference to that. But now, really, the hard work begins. And the hard work entails reconstruction of the Strip, the establishment of that technocratic Palestinian group that I mentioned earlier, which is essentially going to be a committee established pure Palestinian technocrats with the responsibility of the day-to-day administration that will ultimately report into this Board of Peace and the executive board. The executive board, one of the members being Tony Blair himself, a figurehead that's very well known in the Middle East region. And so this is one of the elements of Phase 2. It is not Phase 2 in itself. The Board of Peace is meant to be an oversight authority, but the day-to-day administration is still going to be conducted by Palestinians. And crucial to the success of this phase is the full disarmament of Hamas, because the withdrawal of the remainder of IDF forces is not going to happen until the Israeli side feels that the Strip is going to be a place where there actually will be some stability in the future. One other element of Phase 2 is the establishment of an international peacekeeping force. Still not a lot of detail on which countries are going to be subscribed to that. So yes, a big moment, but only one pillar in a very ambitious project for the region.
And in fact, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has also now pushed back over the inclusion of officials from Qatar and Turkey as well. So a lot of controversy still to do with this board, though the president says the United Nations Security Council accepted the vision for it earlier this year, and he plans to do work alongside the United Nations. And of course, countries still making decisions on whether to join this board or not. I imagine that many countries will want to have a say in what goes on and what kind of decisions this board makes. But then you also have to wonder who will carry out any resolutions that this board makes and who will be able to ensure oversight if this board makes decisions that are, let's say, not in alignment with some other world bodies on these issues. All right, that's Bloomberg's Jumana Bersetchi. Thank you so much. We do want to check markets for you here in the United States as we approach the open in just a few hours. We are seeing futures higher, risk appetite coming back in a healthy way. We have the VIX just above 16, so much more muted than it has been over the past 2 days. The dollar index relatively flat. Let's take a look at bonds because Japan has continued to calm, and that's calming the yield curve in the United States as well. We're back to 424.09 on the 10-year yield, so still above that range that we've been in, but again, not exactly too elevated. The 485.80 mark on the 30-year yield, well below the 493, 494 that we hit earlier on this week. Now, natural gas continues to climb. Obviously, here in the United States, we're seeing a huge cold snap in the northeast. And you also have the likes of gold coming off the boil, if you like. Gold is still above $4,800 an ounce, and Goldman Sachs today raising its forecast for the end of the year to $5,400 an ounce, saying that the types of geopolitical risks that investors are hedging against by buying gold will not be resolved by the end of this year. So let's get to our guest now. Priya Misra of JPMorgan Asset Management joins us now. She is portfolio there, one of the core bond funds. So Priya, what a week for bond managers and just for bond watchers in general. What we saw earlier this week, would you call it a yippee treasury market? Would you call it something that's showing fault lines underneath the surface? And is it a longer term issue given that it was really sparked by fiscal concerns out of Japan?
Sure. So great question. I think it was a bunch of cross currents. So we've had this, I guess, lingering concern around Fed independence. So who's the next Fed chair? The entire DOJ issue. I think that's lingering in the background. And then you had the Japan move. Global rates are highly correlated. So the fact that Japanese bond yields, I didn't think in my career I would see essentially a 30 basis point move in the long end. We had that, and then that tends to spark a rise in term premium globally. So I think, you had this Fed independence issue, then you had the Sell America issue along with Japan. I think it was this sort of perfect storm, and the market is a little less liquid. Risk appetite with all of the geopolitical risks out there, with the fact that there's this concern around, how much risk premiums should be, I think the market essentially panicked. So was it yippee? Absolutely. I think in the last couple of days, we've had a bunch of sort of comforting signs. So we've had the Japan bond market. That's what I've been watching. We haven't been getting a whole lot of sleep because essentially that, we've noticed that there's some stability there, those Japanese bonds, JGB markets calming down. I don't think we're entirely out of the woods though. So we'll be watching that. We have the BOJ meeting on Friday. So, but I think some calm there. And the fact that we've had a lot of corporate bond supply in the US, we're continuing to see demand there. And the fundamentals, when you have all these sort of technical cross currents, you look at the fundamentals are still, we're in a strong, resilient US economy. Inflation is still heading lower. We're in this low higher economy. And so, I think, and the Fed independence issue, I think, it's something we're going to have to grapple with. But I listen to the Supreme Court, I listen to the Senate, I even hear this from the administration. Everyone wants an independent, credible Fed.
Yes.
So I would say, we are using these as opportunities. When you get this yippee bond market, I think that's an opportunity to take on duration risk, keep the credit risk in there, because as long as the fundamentals are strong, we still like credit. But I think duration, that's where there's an opportunity.
The MOVE index has been incredibly low, right? And yet we saw the beginnings of what could have been really nasty, outcomes here for the bond market. We had to have the Treasury Secretary in Davos calm the market. We had to have Japan's economic minister come out and say, look, we have our eyes on this. We're going to do something. Everyone should remain calm. And we also had the Treasury Secretary say that he spoke to Japanese officials. All of that had to happen before the bond market calmed down. At some point, does the bond market stop believing these officials that everyone should just calm down? Where's the evidence?
I think, if the fundamentals remain solid, I still keep coming back to fundamentals. So if inflation remains well-behaved, heading closer to 2%, we're going to get inflation data later today. I think then we have to watch the news. We have, there's a lot of uncertainty, geopolitical, fiscal uncertainty. Do we get any big fiscal expansion in the US? I think, so I still come back to if the fundamentals remain where they are, where we're not going to get additional fiscal, we already know what the one big beautiful bill will entail. I think then, we look at these as opportunities. We think that this is, this will calm down. It's hard to say what that peak is. We've been thinking 375 to 4.25 on the 10-year. We still hold by that range. Will the Sell America narrative take on because somebody decides to diversify a little bit out of the US? I think then that's an opportunity when you break out of that range. So I think the range is solid. Can you have headlines, news, all of the cross currents take us a little bit away from the range? Absolutely. But I think we still, look at fundamentals and think that range should hold.
The FOMC meeting is next week already, right? We'll hear from Fed Chair Jay Powell. Does he hold as much credibility as he did a couple of weeks ago? And is there anything that could surprise us next week?
I think the market's not expecting much next week. I think rightfully so, because I think the easy, if I may say so, the easy risk management rate cuts are done. And the Fed has indicated that they're going to be on hold. There's no urgency. They're waiting for inflation to get closer to 2%. On your question around Fed credibility, I think the Fed has been credible for a while, and I think that credibility, if at all, got stronger over the last 2 weeks, because what we've seen is strong pushback from the Fed chair, talking about Fed independence. We've heard it from the Senate, we've heard it from the Supreme Court. So I think the Fed chair, and now is there a division at the Fed? Absolutely. Look at the economic environment. I think it's right that there are some people who are concerned about the inflation side of the mandate. There are others who are concerned about the labor side of the mandate. I think that division remains. We're not going to get a dot plot, but that dot plot suggests that division. But I think for the chair of the Fed to say, we've done a lot, we're going to wait and see the data, we're going to remain focused on our dual mandate, I think that's what we'll hear, and that's good for the market.
What's the next big risk catalyst? I mean, obviously we get jobs the week after, but in this environment, it feels like that's years away. Anything can happen between now and then.
Right. So I think, back to, we will be watching jobs, we'll be watching inflation. We get some data today. Initial claims would be important. Other than that, I would say what we're watching is as corporates are starting to issue. There's been a lot of issuance so far. We expect more issuance. We'll be watching in terms of catalysts. Does that demand for fixed income remain strong? Given all of the headlines, do people still look at fundamentals and say, look, I'm getting income from fixed income, I'm getting, diversification, essentially just watching.
To that point, Priya, is the whole universe of corporate issuance all one, or can people sort of be on a buyer's strike when it comes to AI debt eventually, let's say, and still have plenty of appetite for everything else out there?
I think, we'll be looking at earnings as well. So there's going to be a lot of AI issuance. We know that they're building out. It has to be funded. We're seeing significant demand because the earnings are still there. So as long as the earnings remain solid, as long as AI adoption starts to pick up, and we do expect this is the year or the next year, we're going to see AI adoption across the board. As long as that happens, the profit numbers remain, the revenue numbers remain. I think, that demand for AI debt, now it's all about valuations. There will be likely some concession that will have to be, if you get a large amount of issuance, we expect some widening in those spreads. I would expect that demand does remain across the board. But I'm glad you bring this up, because dispersion within the credit market is rising. You look at credit spreads and they look extremely tight, but then you start looking at CCC, that's where there's much more widening. I think, if you're late in the credit cycle, do we have credit cockroaches, which was the big rage, late last year? I think we have to be really careful. We look at fundamentals, we look at, leverage ratios, we look at, revenue numbers. And I think that's when we will need to make sure that we pick up that dispersion. So we're careful about what we're buying, what we're not. So I would say overall, we're seeing demand for fixed income, but it's up to us as active fund managers to make sure that we buy what we like and, sort of underweight the sectors where we think that spreads are too tight.
Priya, we have to leave it there, but thank you so much going on in this market. Very appreciative for your time. That is Priya Misra of JPMorgan Asset Management. We are seeing futures higher today. It does look like it's going to be more of a risk appetite on kind of day, particularly for the Nasdaq 100 after yesterday Jensen Huang injected some optimism into the AI market in particular. We had the Philly SOX index up big and hitting records once again. So we're back with that trade as well. Let's look at the bond universe, because as Priya said, that 10-year is going to stay in that range, and indeed it is well within that range today at 423.89, well below the almost 430 that we hit earlier in this week. The 30-year yield at 485, and obviously gold just off a little bit today, but again still above $4,800 an ounce, with Goldman Sachs raising its target by more than 10% for year-end to $5,400 an ounce. Now, let's get back to Davos. We have Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix moderating a panel that includes the European Investment Bank President, Nadia Calvino, and Irish Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, on European productivity and funding innovations.
How will we be able to attract talents here? Do you ever wish you were based in the US? I decided to build this company starting with Europe, to scale it in the US. So we're in the United States, we're in the UAE. We want to be a global leader with European roots. And why did I do that? Because I believe in Europe, and I believe it comes back to what you are saying about peace. The mission of our company is to build space vehicles for humanity. It means every vehicle we built, capsule first and then rockets, we built it across nations so that we can share critical military and civil technologies across these nations. So we want to scale the European model of collaboration across the world. And that's why we started in Europe, because I think that's really important. Space is the future of humanity. We can decide to build it in a confrontational manner. And of course, some will do it because this is our human nature. but we can decide to build it in the way we've built the European Union. And this is what we're trying to do with the expression company, so far successfully, actually.
Taoiseach, I mean, if, what would you do? What would you change tomorrow if you didn't need unanimity? Full stop.
I mean, I think that the single market, in my view, I think the Capital Markets Union are personally, and there are political challenges. I mean, you're correct. It's a structural. It's democracy too, by the way, which is a positive. And one of the most positive things Europe is going for it is it's a beacon, it's a bastion of free speech, freedom of assembly. All of these things are very valuable. Strong culture. A lot of people want to come to Europe to live. A lot of people want to come to Europe to work. So those are the fundamental strengths. But I think from a competitiveness point of view, certainly, like some of the omnibus simplification measures that have already been introduced by the President of the Commission have been slowed down in Parliament or have been not supported. And so that multi-layered structure is a problem. We're not a company. We're 27 member states, all political entities, polities that have parliaments and so on. So this is complex. And that's challenging in terms of efficacy and getting things done quickly. On the other hand, if you go through COVID-19, European Union probably responded more effectively than anybody else in the world, in my view, in terms of export authorization. It didn't prohibit the export of any component part of vaccines. It was the strongest donator of vaccines globally, and I think did a fantastic job working with industry. I was a health minister in the early 2000s. That level of coordination between the Commission and industry was not there. Wouldn't have been there when SARS erupted. It was there during COVID. I pay tribute to the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and others. I think that was a very effective partnership, and Europe showed its strength and what it's capable of doing. And remember, the key vaccine, one of the key vaccines was BioNTech. It was a European vaccine, actually. Pfizer, and that's a good partnership. They were a mega company. They managed to distribute, market, and so on. It became known as the Pfizer drug. It's kind of interesting. But actually, and it was a good combination and a good partnership. So I think those are illustrations of what can be done. But we do need, on the entrepreneur side, we do need more VC availability, venture capital and so on. And companies do need, and there is that sense in Europe that it's not as freely available to SMEs as a lot of our companies, some of their orientation is US in terms of venture capital. And that's a problem. That shouldn't be the case. We've had discussions in some sectors like health, for example, where there are significant barriers, where you have almost 27 individual competencies and in terms of regulatory bodies and so on. And so there are clear areas where we can simplify. And there's a political will to simplify. Definitely. There's a will in the Commission to simplify regulation. But the problem that was referenced earlier of how you get through the different structures is the challenge.
But Nadia Calvino, is it structural or is it also just a political cycle, right?
Well, I very much agree with what has been said, that in a way it's the challenge of Europe and it's one of its strengths, that we provide a message of stability to investors. So you know that there's not going to be a situation as we live with some other superpowers in the world, where you wake up in the morning and you wonder what happened, and then by lunchtime maybe it has changed, and by night it's a different policy. So Europe is trying to provide a very different message. It's one of a beacon. It's an anchor with a swiveling chain. So it can move, but your bases, your values are very clear. And I was thinking about this when Nicolas was talking about their currents and the winds. In that kind of situation, you know what you need: a clear compass. Where are you heading? A strong leadership, which I hope tonight, we will see this strong leadership, and everybody rowing in the same direction. And I think that is the recipe for our success. And the second thing I really wanted to share, and the diagnosis of what needs to be done: market integration, large-scale investment, simplification, and I would add win-win partnerships around the world. And the Mercosur agreement is a very good example of what's going on in terms of Europe reaching out to the rest of the world and building on its strength as a world superpower in trade. The diagnosis is clear, and what I think we need to do is to get on with it and do it. And from the European Investment Bank's perspective, we're trying to contribute to all of them, and in particular mobilizing private investment. I wanted to just mention this venture capital issue, because indeed, Europe is in a certain sense, and we had discussed this, Hélène, in one of our meetings, is the incubator of the world. So we have excellent startups, excellent ideas, technologies, talent. But then when these companies need to scale, they don't have a totally integrated market, and they cannot find 500 million, 1 billion that may be necessary at a later stage in a growth stage of their cycle. Yeah. And that is an area where if we're going to try to the maximum to make a difference from the European Investment Bank, to be a catalyzer, to try to reach the necessary scale for Europe.
And that was Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix conducting a panel at the World Economic Forum in Davos on whether Europe can make waves. It's treading water right now. You can follow all of the panels and all of the happenings on your terminal at TLIV Go. Now to other top stories trending on the terminal this morning. Alibaba preparing to list its chip-making arm T-Head. It's tapping strong investor interest in the small circle of companies looking to compete with NVIDIA in the AI accelerators business. Sources say that as a first step, Alibaba plans to restructure the unit as a business partly owned by employees. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman has been meeting with top investors in the Middle East to line up funding for a new investment round that could total at least $50 billion. According to sources, those investors included some of the leading state-backed funds in Abu Dhabi. OpenAI also recently held talks with Amazon to raise at least $10 billion. The Japanese bond sell-off that wiped out $41 billion across the curve was triggered by just $280 million of trading. The rout pushed yields to records, stoking worries that Japan was headed into a Liz Truss moment. It led U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to seek reassurances for what he called a 6th standard deviation move. Now a look at what's ahead today. We get PCE data along with GDP data and jobless claims out at 8:30 Eastern, followed by personal income and spending at 10. Blue Origin planning to launch the new Shepherd mission today. And Intel earnings report after the market close. Of course, Intel has seen a great couple of days for that stock. We also, of course, had the Board of Peace first meeting today. Several founding members. You see Jared Kushner speaking there right now. This is in Davos. We had the signing ceremony earlier with pledges from Donald Trump to work with the United Nations. Futures pointed higher. That's it for Bloomberg Brief. Surveillance continues the conversation. This is Bloomberg.